Hi, welcome to today's video. My name is Paul. So this week, short video, we're going to take a look at Cezanne. Paul Cezanne, very interesting painter. Many people say that he was the originator of modern art. It's a big claim, but it's not without some justification. Anyway, on screen, on the left, you can see a very old, very early photograph of Cezanne as a young man. Very rare photographs of Cezanne. It's a bit like Vincent van Gogh as well. They just maybe camera shy, or I guess cameras were not, they were just getting started in those days. So it wasn't like today where everybody's getting their photograph taken all the time. And then on the right, a later self-portrait. Cezanne did quite a few self-portraits, not as many as some like Van Gogh, for example, but still he did quite a few. He's probably best known for doing oil landscape paintings, a particular mountain in the south of France. Cezanne was from the south of France, and he spent most of his life there. He did go to Paris for a short time, but I don't think he really fitted in, and I think he preferred to be back home in the south of France. By all accounts, he was a difficult man. He had very few friends, and it was difficult for people to get to know him and to stay friendly with him. He really started to emerge as an artist about the same time as the Impressionists, so sort of 1870-ish, and he did take part in that first Impressionist exhibition. A couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I did a video about Impressionism, talking about that society that a group of artists formed, the Anonymous Society of Painters and Sculptors, and I can't remember, it's a long name. Cezanne was part of that, and he did take part in that exhibition, but he was not an Impressionist. He was never an Impressionist, and his style of art, the art that he wanted to make and he was developing, was kind of in some ways the opposite of Impressionism. He was much more about solid forms and geometrical shapes and things that just weren't part of the Impressionist art movement. So sometimes you'll see him labeled as an Impressionist artist. I disagree with that. Post-Impressionist, sure, why not? Post-Impressionism was not an art movement as such. It was just a period in time in France with a number of artists, mostly French artists, but not entirely. So yeah, I would call him a post-Impressionist. Early modern artist, perhaps. I did find this interesting article comparing Cezanne and Van Gogh. Again, there's some overlap in when they were active. Van Gogh, of course, was active for a much shorter time. He died young, and he got started later than Cezanne. I'd say Cezanne was getting started about the same time as the Impressionists' first exhibition. But anyway, it's saying Vincent injected into his paintings this immense psychological yearnings, whereas Cezanne erects psychological barriers to lock the viewer out of his works. So very different approaches. Cezanne's forms are solid and immutable. Vincent's inanimate objects dance with kinetic energy. If you think of something like Starry Night painting, all the swirls around the stars and things. So we can't find Cezanne, the man, in his paintings. In Vincent's canvases, on the other hand, we can't avoid him. I don't entirely agree with that last sentence. I think Cezanne did develop his own style in a very unique way of painting at that time. So certainly you can see the artist and his ideas and what he was trying to do in his paintings. Maybe his personality didn't come through as much, Vincent van Gogh, on the other hand, his style of painting, I say all this kinetic energy and the troubles that Vincent van Gogh had inside his head, the mental health issues and things, maybe those are more obvious in his paintings. When you go online and you look, Cezanne and Vincent van Gogh did meet on at least one or two occasions. Most accounts say that they did not get on. They were not friends, they were never friends. They had very different personalities, very different ideas about art. Some people say that they had a sort of mutual admiration for each other's art, whereas other sources say that actually they hated each other's art. So I don't know. But certainly their personalities were very different and they didn't form a friendship. Vincent van Gogh did form some lasting friendships, and he did correspond with some artists on a regular basis. Cezanne was not one of those. A lot of Cezanne's paintings I find difficult. Aesthetically, I'm not drawn to them very much. However, his watercolor still life paintings are amazing. They're very inspiring for me. Now, the way he uses, and you can see on screen an example, the way he uses watercolor is completely different to the way I do it, but I find it fascinating and interesting and something that I would like to try. Have a go at doing this sort of style of painting. He's sort of using layers, and it's something that when I first got started with watercolor, I tried it, I didn't like it, and then I went to more sort of an immediate sort of wet in wet. I think oil painters call it alla prima, something like that. It's just putting down one layer, wet in wet, and that's it. Rather than having these layers where you let one layer dry and then put another layer on top. This seems to be the approach that Cezanne was doing, and I do like the results. They're very interesting. It might be something that I try again in the future. Now that I feel slightly more confident using watercolor and a bit more knowledgeable about the medium, I might try something like this again. Some of his watercolor paintings, I like the unfinished style. Now, some people will say, but this is just a sketch, it's a study for colors or something like this. Maybe it is, but I still like this unfinished style. I like watercolors that don't cover the whole paper. They're leaving white bits. They're suggesting things and the viewer can fill in the gaps. I really enjoy that style of art. So again, something inspiring for me. And one last one, again, very loose, probably just a color study, but it is, as a piece of artwork, I really like it. So Cezanne, difficult man. Some of his art I find difficult. I don't look at Cezanne the same way that I would Vincent van Gogh. I'm much more into Vincent van Gogh's style of art. But I still appreciate some of Cezanne's art, especially his watercolor still lifes. And then, of course, there's a whole aspect of Cezanne where he was playing with the canvas, the fact that we're painting onto flat, whether it's a canvas or a piece of paper, it's a flat surface, two-dimensional, but we're painting and drawing three-dimensional things, still lifes or landscapes, portraits, whatever it is. And playing around with that, it's something that the Cubists took on as well. But Cezanne was the first, really, that I know of in Western art to really play with this idea of three-dimensional objects on a two-dimensional surface. So that's another aspect of Cezanne's art that I find fascinating. He never really had much recognition or success as an artist during his lifetime. But afterwards, I'd say, people like Picasso referred to him as the father of modern art, really. In terms of like the top 5 most expensive paintings ever sold at auction, in all time. The artists, the 5 artists, number 1 is Leonardo da Vinci. Number 2 is Wilhelm de Kooning. And then number 3 is Paul Cezanne. So it was his painting Card Players, I think it's called. One of his oil paintings. So he's in the top 3 artists of most expensive paintings ever sold. Read into that whatever you want, because there's all sorts of factors why a painting might be expensive. But at least one of the factors is there is a demand for his paintings. You're not going to go out and buy a Cezanne, an original Cezanne painting with a few $100s, euros, pounds, whatever. You're going to need at least hundreds of thousands and possibly millions. So although he didn't have a huge amount of success or recognition during his lifetime, afterwards he became kind of superstar of modern art. And many people say, including people like Picasso, that he was the originator of modern art. So a very interesting artist. If you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching and listening, and hopefully see you again in next week's video.